Okay. Can everyone see this?
Yep.
Okay. So we've been hearing from some partners at Chromium on some desire to have some more context added to things in the crash reporting API. Context about the page that can be useful for debugging crashes. So I just kind of want to talk about a little bit of the current state of things, and then some of the more pieces of individual bits of context we'd like to add to the reports, and then a new API addition proposal on top of that. So, okay, so right now we have a bunch of default bits of information added to the crash report that goes over the wire. Or actually not a bunch, we have a couple. And it's represented by this interface in the crash reporting API, the spec. Right now we just have a reason and a stack. And the reason is an enum of a few different values that gives the developer consuming the crash report some context as to what happened and what was the cause of the crash from like a platform perspective. And the stack trace is available on unresponsive page crashes. And that basically is the same thing that the same kind of stack trace you could get from JavaScript to help developers kind of understand what was going on in their stack that caused the page to be unresponsive and so on. This is useful information, but we want to make it more useful, and we are interested in adding a few more bits of information to the crash report body that gets sent over the wire. And there's been some desire for this for a little while now, so there's a couple issues open about adding more bits to this body. The first one is kind of like an is top level bit, which we've seen some developers want to know, is just by having some more default information added to the report, whether you're in a top level context or an iframe context, and we could just add that piece of information by default. The browser can collect it to the report. And then there's actually a more general issue about adding more context to these reports. This would include things like whether the process is foregrounded or what the document's visibility state is, other pieces of web platform information that we can just by default add to the report without making the users do more complicated data collecting on the front end and weasel those into reports and so on. So we just want to make the default reports a little more useful. These issues have been, there's a few issues that have been open for a little while about this. And so I just want to gauge some people's feedback on moving forward with this. We think there's a 2 or 3 bits of information that we could add to make this more useful that are pretty harmless and easy to implement. And I think they could be some good low-hanging fruit that we'd like to add to these reports. So we're planning on implementing and experimenting with this in Chromium as soon as we can. And I have a spec PR for one of these bits of information. And so I just want to use this as some context to try and get some more feedback, especially from other browsers, what the appetite might be around some of this stuff is. But the second part of this proposal has to do with adding arbitrary information to the crash report. So the proposal for this is something like a key value store, basically. Like I said, with the crash report body right now, you basically get by default whatever pieces of information we all agree to add to that and send over the wire. Things that would be useful for the developer to see without them having to do extra work to getting access to that information. But there's so much complicated state that some developers and some parties want to collect client side and be able to associate with crash reports that could make it way more useful for them to actually debug what's going on and capture specific client side feature flags and so on. There's also an issue open about this on the crash reporting spec repository. And some developers have expressed interest in this. And I think in Chromium, we're pretty supportive of some version of this. The idea is basically a key value store API associated with the crash reporting infrastructure that allows you to just add additional context. The naive approach to this, the easy version of this would be to basically piggyback off the storage interface. This is kind of the backing object that's used for session storage and local storage, just the generic key value storage map under the hood that varies in terms of scope and quota, depending on what storage it's backing. So our idea would be to basically have some sort of crash reporting API storage getter somewhere that could allow you to associate string in, string out data with your app state as it's running, and then that would be used to compile all that together into the crash report sent over the wire if you have a page crash or something. So that would look basically kind of just exactly what I said. Some sort of storage interface getter, a new one specifically for crash reporting, and we would just wire it up similar to the other storage getters. So it would be subject to the same quotas and scoping that we get with the storage standard. And then there's some open questions around this, like exactly where should the getter be placed? How does this look from a privacy perspective? It seems kind of benign. I spelled that wrong in this slide, but I think it needs maybe some broader discussion, because I think this is all information and data that you could just collect and send off on your own as the app developer. And we're just trying to make it easier to associate with a given report. But all of this, you need some broader discussion. But yeah, I just want to use this as an opportunity to try and get some thoughts from people on how this generally looks, and if it passes the smell test for certain folks here, and if people think it's useful. I was hoping some folks, I'm not sure. Okay, looks like Baz is here from Mozilla, and so I think Baz has been a little active on the spec, or at least expressed some opinions in crash reporting stuff.
I have not.
No, okay, never mind.
I was just finding myself with a lack of context.
Okay.
So I don't really. I wish I could say something useful, but I'm not sure that I can. I can speculate, but I don't think that's useful at this point. I can say that I don't see any obvious objections right now, but I haven't even been able to find our spec position, which I've been looking for the past 5 minutes. So
yeah, yeah, we're still recording, so let's postpone the discussion to after. Yep.
Well, I think that's pretty much all I've got. So okay. I think we're happy to go to discussion now. Peter, maybe you want to add something? Peter's with me today. He's a partner that's interested in getting more arbitrary context added to crash reports, and can speak to maybe some of the motivation behind this and the utility. So Peter, if you've got something to add just in the presentation before we move on to discussion and stop recording, feel free. But
yeah. Hi, Dom. Yeah, and everybody. No, I think you did a great job presenting it. I work on telemetry for the workspace products. We have an effort to try to understand our Chromium crash reports and even potentially drive them down. And so this is sort of data that we would, for other types of exceptions you might see on in the browser from the client application side, like an uncaught.js exception, we have ways to associate this sort of key value metadata with it. And I think that this would be fantastic in terms of like making the reports that we're seeing, the potential Chromium crash reports, more actionable from our side. But I think you represented it well, Dom. Thank you.
Cool. With that, Yoav, I think we're probably good to stop recording if you want to move to discussion.